My daughter-in-law dropped the photo album I made into the recycling bin right in front of me and said, "We're trying to declutter, Dorothy." My son laughed. I smiled, picked up my coat, and didn't say goodbye. The drive home from their place in Oakville took 40 minutes. I know every turn of that highway by now. For 11 years, I made it twice a month, sometimes more. I used to think of it as the road to family. That evening, it felt like something else entirely. The lake was dark on my left, the kind of November dark that sits low and heavy over everything. I kept both hands on the wheel and drove slowly, even though there was no traffic to speak of. The album had taken me 6 weeks. I want to be clear about that, not to ask for sympathy, but because it matters. 6 weeks of printing photographs at the drugstore on Kerr Street, sorting them by year, writing small captions in my best handwriting with a felt tip pen I'd ordered online because I wanted the ink to last. There were pictures of my grandson Callum from the day he was born right through his first day of grade 1. Pictures of my son Patrick, when he was small, the same round eyes, the same gap between his front teeth. I'd laminated the cover myself. It was, I think, the most careful thing I had made in years. She said it so easily. We're trying to declutter, like it was a receipt from a gas station, like it was junk mail. Patrick didn't say a word to her. He just looked at me the way he'd been looking at me lately, that particular expression men practice when they want to seem neutral, somewhere between apologetic and absent. He said, "It was really thoughtful, Mum," and then he walked into the kitchen to refresh his drink. I bent down, took the album out of the recycling bin, tucked it under my arm, and left. They didn't follow me to the door. I sat in the driveway for a while before I started the engine. The porch light came on automatically. It always does, motion sensor. One of the upgrades I helped pay for 2 summers ago when they were renovating the mudroom. The light lit up the empty front step, and then, after a minute, clicked off again. I watched it go dark. Then I drove home. My house in Burlington is small and suits me. I've lived here since Patrick was in high school, since his father and I separated without much ceremony and divided everything the way you do when the love runs out before the paperwork does. I kept the house, the cat, and the habit of going to bed too late. Gerald kept the truck and the fishing gear and, eventually, someone younger who didn't remind him of everything he hadn't managed to become. That night, I set the album on the kitchen table and made myself a cup of tea I didn't really want. The cat, a gray tabby named Ellis, settled on the chair across from me and watched me with the mild contempt cats reserved for people who are upset about things they can't explain to animals. I looked at the album cover. Callum, age 6 months, laughing at something off camera, his whole face open with it, the way babies laugh before they learn to be self-conscious. I had been there that day. I was the one making the face that made him laugh. His mother had not been in the room. I opened the folder I keep in the drawer by the fridge, the one I labeled, a few years back, simply House Matters. Inside were the records I'd started keeping when something in me, some quiet, careful part, decided it was time to write things down. The renovation contribution, $8,000 in the spring of 2021, when they said they needed help with the mudroom and the new windows. I wrote the check without being asked twice. Patrick had mentioned it once, and I said yes because he was my son, and that's what you do, I thought. Before that, the down payment assistance when they bought the house, $42,000, drawn from the RRSP I'd been building since I was 34, a steady, cautious fund I'd added to every year through the lean years of single motherhood. Patrick said it would just be a loan. We'd make it official later. We never made it official. I didn't push. There was the car. Patrick's transmission went in January of 2020, the week he was between jobs, and I handed over my spare vehicle, without being asked, my old Civic that still ran perfectly well, and told him to take his time. He kept it for 14 months. When he finally returned it, the back bumper had a crack in it that nobody mentioned. Monthly grocery transfers I'd set up during the pandemic. $500 each month for 8 months, because his wife, Renata, had reduced her hours at the dental clinic, and they were worried. I set it up as automatics. I never canceled it after things got better for them. For 3 years, 3 years that transfer kept going, quiet and steady, while I bought my own groceries on a fixed income and told myself it was fine. I pulled out my phone and opened the spreadsheet I'd started 6 months earlier, one afternoon when I couldn't sleep and needed to do something with my hands besides worry. The total at the bottom of the column made me sit back in my chair. $94,320. Over 9 years. I closed the spreadsheet. I wasn't shocked I'd looked at that number before. But that night, after the recycling bin, after Patrick's careful, neutral expression, after driving home alone in the November dark, the number landed differently. It had weight. It had a face. It looked a lot like that album cover, a small boy laughing at a grandmother who was standing just out of frame. The next morning was a Saturday. I drove to the Tim Hortons on Brant Street, ordered a medium dark roast, and sat by the window watching the parking lot fill up with people running errands. A man scraped ice off his windshield in the way Canadians do, methodically, without complaint. A woman pushed a stroller one-handed while checking her phone. Ordinary life, unremarkable and continuous. I'd brought a notepad. On the first page I wrote 2 words. What now? It wasn't a question. I didn't put a question mark. It was more like a direction, the beginning of a sentence I needed to finish. I had spent the last several years being available. That was how I thought of it. Available. Available for Callum when Renata had her yoga class on Wednesday evenings. Available for the school pickups when Patrick had a late meeting. Available to bring dinner over when nobody had time to cook, to help with Callum's Halloween costume, to sit in the waiting room of the walk-in clinic when Renata had a bad cough and Patrick was in Vancouver for work. I was the one who showed up. I was, as my friend Bev once said gently, the infrastructure of that household invisible until something needed fixing. I had tried to say something, once. About 2 years ago, in the spring, Patrick had asked if I could lend them another $8,000 for a new deck they were planning. I'd taken a breath and said, Patrick, I want to talk about some of the other money first, the stuff from the RRSP and the monthly transfers. He'd looked at me with that neutral expression and said, Mum, I thought you wanted to help. Did I misunderstand? And I had backed down. I said, no, of course not. You didn't misunderstand. I wrote the check for the deck. That was the last time I tried. I finished my coffee and drove to the bank. My branch is on Plains Road, a low building with automatic doors that stick in the cold. My advisor, a woman named Christine, who always wears interesting earrings, met me in her office near the back. I'd called ahead. She'd set aside an hour. I need to cancel some automatic transfers, I said, and I need to review who has access to my accounts. Christine pulled up my file without blinking. She'd worked with me for 6 years. She knew my situation in the way that good bank advisors do, thoroughly and without judgment. You have one joint account, she said carefully, the one you opened when Patrick was in university for emergencies. He still has signing authority. I know, I said. I'd like to change that. She made a note. We went through everything, the monthly transfer, 2 other small automatic payments I'd set up for Patrick's household that I barely remembered authorizing. One of them, $40 a month, was going toward a streaming subscription that I didn't even have access to. I'd been paying for their television for 3 years without knowing it. Cancel all of them, I said. Everything going to their accounts. Christine typed. She asked me to confirm each one. I confirmed them. When we were finished, she said, Is there anything else you'd like to adjust? Yes, I said. I'd like to open a separate account for my grandson, in trust. I want to name it for Callum specifically, with conditions, education, housing, when he's grown. Nothing accessible to his parents. She smiled carefully, professionally. We can do that. We spent another 30 minutes on the details. The terms, the conditions, the triggers. I signed everything in my own handwriting, slowly, each signature deliberate. When I left the bank, the air outside was sharp and bright, the kind of cold that clarifies things. In the car, I sat for a moment. I thought about calling my solicitor, Frances, who had handled the sale of my mother's house years ago and who knew me well enough to skip the small talk. I called her. She picked up on the second ring. "Dorothy," she said, "you sound like you've made a decision." "I need to update my will," I said. "Come Tuesday," she said. "I'll have the kettle on." The message from Patrick came on Sunday afternoon while I was raking leaves in the backyard. I heard my phone buzz on the porch railing and left it there until I finished the row I was working on. There is something satisfying about raking leaves, the same stripe of calm you get from any work that has a clear beginning and a clear end. His voicemail was careful. "Hey Mom, just checking in. Renata mentioned you might have seemed upset when you left on Friday. I didn't realize. She was just trying to keep things organized. You know how she gets about clutter. Anyway, give me a call when you get this." She was just trying to keep things organized. I set the phone back on the railing. Ellis was watching me from the window. I finished the leaves. That evening, Bev came over. She lives 4 streets away and has been my closest friend since our sons were in the same grade 2 class, which means we've been through enough together that she walks into my kitchen without knocking and knows where I keep the good tea. She took one look at my face and put the kettle on herself. "Patrick called," I said. "What did he say?" I told her. "The album. The recycling bin." Renata's voice when she said it. The casual, unconcerned way she'd dropped it in. The same way you'd drop a flyer. Bev sat down. She is a practical woman, not a sentimental one, and she'd held her tongue about Patrick and Renata for years. I knew she had, because Bev holds nothing else back, and the silence on that particular subject was always deliberate. "You know what I've been waiting for you to say?" she said. "Don't," I said. "I'm not going to say I told you so. You absolutely were. I was going to say, I've been waiting for you to be angry." I looked at my tea. "I'm not angry, actually." "No?" "I'm clear. I thought about it. For the first time in a while, I know exactly what I'm doing. That's a strange feeling when you've been uncertain for years." Bev nodded slowly. "Good," she said. "Clear is better than angry." We sat in the kitchen until nearly 11, the way we have done for 30 years. Talked about her daughter's new apartment in Victoria. Talked about the neighbor's renovation and the noise it made. Talked about nothing that mattered, which is sometimes the most important conversation. When she left, she stopped in the doorway. "Don't answer if he calls again tonight," she said. "Let it wait." "I wasn't going to," I said. She smiled. "Just making sure." Tuesday morning, I drove to Frances's office in downtown Burlington, a heritage building with old wooden floors that creak in a way that sounds like it has things to say. She met me at the reception desk herself, which she always does for people she's known a long time. Her office smelled like coffee and old paper. She'd already pulled up my existing will on her screen, the version I'd updated 4 years ago, when I'd left everything to Patrick outright, with a small bequest to the Halton Humane Society. "What are we changing?" she asked. "Everything to Patrick. I'd like to redirect that," I said. "To Callum, and to a few organizations. The public library, the women's shelter on Brant. There's a community garden on Maple that's been looking for a permanent space." Frances made notes. "And Patrick?" "A small keepsake allowance," I said. "He can have the furniture he grew up with, if he wants it. Whatever he doesn't take, the rest is to be sold." "The house?" "To Callum when he turns 25. If he wants to sell it, that's his decision, but not before." Frances didn't react. She was the kind of solicitor who understood that people's lives were their own business, and that her job was to document decisions, not evaluate them. "And Renata?" she asked, just to be thorough. "Not in the will at all," I said simply. We spent an hour going through the new document line by line. Frances asked the questions she was required to ask. Was I making this decision freely? Was I of sound mind? Had anyone pressured me? I answered each one clearly. When she passed the pen across the desk, my hand was steady. Outside, the November sky had cleared to that particular blue you only get in late autumn in southern Ontario, a color so sharp it almost hurts. I walked to my car slowly, Not because my knees were bothering me, but because I wanted to be in it, that cold, still, decided air. My phone buzzed. Patrick again. I let it ring. The visit happened on a Thursday. I was inside, sorting through a box of old knitting patterns I'd found in the hall closet, when I heard a car in the driveway. 2 doors, both of them. I watched through the front window as Patrick came up the walk first, and Renata followed a step behind, the way she does when something was his idea, but she's agreed to come along for management purposes. He was wearing the blue jacket I'd given him for his birthday. She was carrying a reusable grocery bag from Metro, which meant she'd thought about this enough to bring props. I opened the door before they knocked. "Hi, Mum," Patrick said. He was trying to smile. "Can we come in?" I stepped back and let them in, but I didn't offer tea. I sat in the armchair. They took the couch. Renata put the grocery bag on the coffee table. "We brought some things," she said, with a warmth that was entirely manufactured. Callum made a card. She pulled out a folded piece of construction paper, orange, with a drawing of what might have been a cat or possibly a bear, and the words, "I love you, Grandma," in wobbly crayon. I took it. I meant it when I said thank you. That part was real. Patrick cleared his throat. "Mum, we've noticed there was something with the bank this week. A few automatic payments that seem to have stopped." "They have," I said. He paused. "Was there a problem? Did something happen with the account?" "Nothing happened with the account. I canceled them." Renata looked at Patrick. He looked at his hands. Then he looked back at me. "Can I ask why?" I thought about how to answer that. Not what to say. I'd known what to say for a while, but how. Whether to be gentle. Whether it mattered. "Because I've been putting money into your household for 9 years, I said. "I have a record of it. I looked at the total last week and I sat with it for a long time, and I've decided that number is finished. It isn't going to grow anymore." Renata's expression shifted. She had a talent for looking wounded on short notice. "Dorothy, if this is about the album—" "It's not only about the album," I said. "But yes, that too." "It wasn't personal," she said. "We were going through a whole system in the house. We're trying to be more minimal." "You dropped it in the recycling bin," I said, not unkindly, in front of me. 6 weeks of photographs of your son. You dropped it in the bin and called it clutter." Patrick shifted forward. "Mum, I'm not asking for an apology," I said. "I don't need one. I'm just explaining that I saw it very clearly." There was a silence, the kind that has some weight to it. Patrick said quietly, "We've relied on your help. I know that. But you always seem to want to help. You offered. Half the time, I didn't even ask." "You didn't need to ask," I said. "I trained you not to." He looked up. "That was my doing," I said. "I made it easy to take from me. I filled the gaps before you noticed they existed. That's not blame. It's just what happened, but it stops now." Renata stood. Her voice was controlled, but the edges had something in them. "So what? You're punishing us by cutting us off. Is this because of the will, too? Callum told us you'd set up an account for him." I looked at her. "Callum is 7. He didn't tell you anything about the details." She sat back down. "What I've done with my finances is my business," I said. "Callum will be taken care of. Patrick, you're my son, and I love you. But I am no longer available to fund your life." That ended on Friday. Patrick was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, in a voice that was smaller than I was used to, "I didn't know it was that much, Mum. I really didn't." "I know," I said. And that was the truest thing either of us said that afternoon. They left shortly after. Renata didn't say goodbye. Patrick hugged me at the door, briefly and without ease, the kind of hug that holds a question inside it. I let him. I watched the car back out of the driveway, and I stood on the porch in the cold for a moment, not waiting for anything, just being still in my own space. Then I went inside and put the kettle on. My granddaughter called the next morning. Not Patrick's child, my daughter's girl, Maya, 22, studying environmental science at Dalhousie in Halifax. She calls when she thinks of it, which is not often enough, and always at the right time. She didn't know what had happened. She just called. "Grandma, I've been thinking about you. I had this dream that you cut all your hair off." I laughed. A real one, from somewhere that hadn't laughed in days. "I haven't done anything that dramatic. Are you okay? You sound different." "I think I am," I said. Different is probably right. We talked for 40 minutes, about Halifax weather, about her research project on native plant corridors in Nova Scotia, about a boy she wasn't quite calling a boyfriend yet. It was the most ordinary conversation, and I sat in my kitchen chair with my tea and felt the particular gift of someone calling just to talk, not to ask, not to manage, not to neutralize, just to hear my voice. Before she hung up, she said, "I'm coming home for Christmas. I want to bring you something I made. It's not much, but I made it myself, so." "That's the best kind of thing," I said. There was a pause. "Are you sure you're okay, Grandma?" "More than I've been in a while," I said. "I'll explain at Christmas." The letter came on a Monday, in a plain envelope, Patrick's handwriting on the outside. I left it on the table for 2 days. Not out of avoidance, I wasn't afraid of it, but because I'd learned, late in life, that you don't have to respond to things the moment they arrive. Some things ask to be sat with. On Wednesday evening, I made soup and opened the envelope. "Mom, I've been trying to figure out what to say. I keep starting and deleting. I'm not good at this. You know that. I don't think I realized how much you'd given us. I'm not saying that to make you feel guilty for stopping or to get you to reconsider. I'm saying it because I think I just accepted things without adding them up. I'm sorry for that. Not about the account. About what that number means. About the album. Renata didn't mean it the way it landed, but I know that doesn't change how it landed. I love you. I'm not sure what happens next, Patrick." I read it twice. Then I folded it and put it in the drawer with George's old letters. Not my George, but Patrick's father, the real one. The one who wrote a note every year on Callum's birthday, even after he'd moved to Red Deer, and we'd all adjusted to the distance. It wasn't forgiveness and it wasn't repair. It was a beginning, which is not nothing. I wrote back on a piece of good stationery, the cream kind with a small embossed maple leaf in the corner that I'd bought and never used. "Patrick, thank you for writing. I know it was hard. What I did for myself, not to hurt you, not to bargain, not to teach you something. I reached a number that told me the truth about what I'd been doing, and I decided to stop. I'm not angry. I've been a lot of things over the last few weeks, and angry wasn't one of them. What I've been is awake. I think that's the right word. I love you. Come for dinner in December. Bring Callum. Leave your wife at home if she needs time. The door is always open for both of you when you're ready. Mum." I sealed it and put it in the mailbox before I could think too hard about the phrasing. It was Bev who suggested the quilting group at the community center, something she'd joined in September and kept mentioning with the pointed casualness of someone who wants you to do a thing. I finally went on a Thursday in December, mainly because I'd run out of reasons not to. The room smelled like fabric and coffee, long folding tables covered with colored squares, 8 women of various ages doing various things, 2 of them arguing amiably about bias tape in the way that people argue when they love each other and the stakes are low. Bev introduced me. Nobody made a fuss. I sat down beside a woman named June, who was working on a crib quilt in yellows and greens, and she handed me a seam ripper and said, "Can you fix this?" I miscounted. I could. I did. By the end of the evening, we'd talked about nothing consequential, and I had agreed to come back the following week. On the way home, I thought about the album sitting on my kitchen shelf. I'd put it there the morning after the Oakville visit, once I decided to keep it. It was still good work. It was 6 weeks of paying attention, of sorting and captioning and choosing. The fact that Renata had tried to throw it away didn't undo any of that. The care I put in was mine. It had always been mine. I started a new project the following weekend. Not the crib quilt, something for myself. A lap quilt in the blues and greens of the Lake Ontario shoreline. The colors you see on a clear day in October when the light is low and the water goes silver at the edges. I didn't have a pattern. I worked from memory. The blocks didn't all line up perfectly. I have never had the patience for perfect, but the color moved across the fabric the way water moves, and that was what I wanted. Maya came home for Christmas. She brought me a hand-woven coaster she'd made in a textile workshop in Halifax, small and uneven, and clearly made by someone learning. "I know it's not much," she said. "I just wanted it to be from my hands." "This is exactly what I needed," I said, and I meant it. Patrick came for dinner on the 23rd. Just him and Callum. We made pierogies, the kind his grandmother used to make from scratch, which takes all afternoon and requires 2 people and a lot of flour. Callum stood on a step stool at the counter and pressed the edges shut with a fork, very seriously, his tongue tucked in the corner of his mouth. He dropped more than he sealed. We didn't say anything about it. After dinner, Callum fell asleep on the couch under the lap quilt I'd been working on. It wasn't finished yet, still missing the binding, but it covered him. Patrick looked at it for a moment. "Did you make that?" "I'm making it," I said, "for me. But he can borrow it tonight." Patrick was quiet. Then he said, "I looked up the RRSP thing. What early withdrawal costs. What you would have lost by taking it out when you did." He paused. I just wanted to know what it actually meant. "Now you know," I said, not unkindly. "Yeah." He looked at his coffee. "I do." We didn't resolve everything that evening. We're not the kind of family that resolves things in a single conversation. We are, in some ways, very Canadian about feelings, which is to say that we let them exist in the room without forcing them into words before they're ready. But we sat together in the kitchen after Callum fell asleep and talked about small things. A podcast he'd been listening to, a walking trail I'd discovered in Bronte Creek, the kind of ordinary conversation that means something different when it comes after a hard period. When he left, he loaded the sleeping Callum into the car seat with the particular tender competence of fathers who've been doing it long enough that it's muscle memory. He came back to the door for his jacket. "Mum," he said, "I know I don't say this enough. I know that's the whole." He stopped, started again. "Thank you, for all of it. Even the parts I didn't see at the time." I nodded. "Go home," I said. "Drive safe." He went. I stood at the door until the taillights disappeared around the corner of the crescent. Then I went back inside, turned off the porch light, and sat at the kitchen table with the last of the tea. Ellis jumped up beside me, which he rarely does, and I let him stay. In the drawer was the letter Patrick had sent, and the one I'd sent back, and beneath them, a folded piece of construction paper, orange, with a crayon bear, or possibly a cat, and the words, "I love you, Grandma," in wobbly, serious letters. I left them all there. I didn't need to look at them again tonight. I knew what they said. On New Year's Day, I finished the quilt. I trimmed the binding, stitched it down, pressed every seam flat. Then I spread it across the back of the armchair by the window, the good one that catches the afternoon light, and I sat in it and looked out at the yard. The snow had come overnight. Not the heavy, wet kind, but fine and dry, the kind that catches in the grass and stays. The hydrangea by the fence was wrapped in it, each dried flower head holding a small drift. The birch tree at the back cast a thin shadow across the white. I had not always known what I was worth. I'd spent a long time calculating my value in terms of what I gave money, time, casseroles, car rides, the quiet readiness to be wherever I was needed. It had taken a recycling bin and an empty drive home on a November night for the calculation to stop making sense. What I knew now was simpler. I was still here. My hands still knew how to make things. The quilt beneath me was evidence of that, not of anything I had given away, but of something entirely mine. My colors, my pattern, my hours. I picked up my tea. Outside, a chickadee landed on the fence post, considered the yard, and flew off. The snow kept its shape in the places it had settled. The light was clear and quiet, and mine. That was enough. That had always been enough. It just took me a while to sit in it. If you've ever poured yourself into people who forgot to look at what they were holding, If you've ever given so much that you stopped counting, because the counting felt ungrateful, I want you to know that stopping isn't cruel. It isn't punishment. It isn't the end of love. It is, very simply, the beginning of being seen. Starting with yourself,